Hello guys and welcome back to another video. Today we are doing a scenario in which in which BRICS and NATO go to war. If you didn't know, BRICS is an economic alliance. It is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And on the other side, we have NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is actually a defensive treaty. So how would this start? Probably Russia invading the Baltics. I don't know how that would bring in CSTO, India and China on the same team. Not very likely. But let's go ahead and begin, see how it plays out. So first things first, and that is that we see Russian troops begin their invasion of the Baltics, with Tallinn being captured, Estonia surrendering, and Russian troops beginning to push into Latvia. But very, very soon after this war, we see the first allies begin to join in, with Belarus joining on the red team, Ukraine on the blue team, Moldova on the blue team, Georgia on the blue team, Mongolia on the red team, North Korea on the red team. Pakistan, honestly, I don't know what they would do. They would probably want to help out China, but they would not want to help out India, so I'm just going to leave them as neutral. Because, they have a 100% urge to help China, but definitely don't want to help India, so they're just going to do neither. With that, we see Austria, Ireland, Bosnia joining, along with Serbia and Kosovo. We see Finland and Sweden join in, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, Iran, Armenia and Azerbaijan, Iraq. We see Myanmar join in, and Laos and Cambodia. With that, we see South Korea and Japan join in. I'm just listing off all the allies. Taiwan and Hong Kong. It might be a second. Vietnam and the Philippines. And at least for now, until literally 2 weeks have gone by, for more allies to join in, Australia and New Zealand join in on the blue team. So yeah, war just escalated fast. What happens next is probably just the continued Russian invasion of Europe, with Russia sending its full military into the Baltics, cutting them off over here in Belarus, leading to a large push into Poland and Lithuania. With that, all of the Baltic states fall. And, honestly, I don't think this is too big of a hit for the blue team. But hey, it's a win for the red team and a loss for the blue team. We then also see Russia begin to send troops into Ukraine, taking a lot of eastern Ukraine. They already control Crimea. They link up and begin a new push into Ukraine. This is before the Ukrainian war in real life, but tensions are still high. That's why I involved Ukraine in the war. We then also see the blue team begin to push begin to push into Serbia, capitulating the country within a couple of weeks, as it has no chance against all of its surrounding neighbors. Meanwhile, we see kind of a land exchange happening in the Middle East, with Russia pushing into Georgia, while the blue team begins its operations into Armenia and northern Iran. We also now see the next round of countries joining in, with Syria and Lebanon on the red team, Israel on the blue team, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, and Oman on the blue team, Yemen on the red team, Palestine on the red team. Egypt stays neutral for now. What else do we see here? Colombia on the blue team, and Cuba on the red team. With that, we now see a massive push into the Middle East by the blue and red teams, both wanting to secure the region. We see this with Israel capturing Palestine and Lebanon, while Turkey and Saudi Arabia begin to push into Syria and Iraq. Meanwhile, the red team pushes into Kuwait and northern Saudi Arabia, while also beginning to push into Azerbaijan. And the blue team continues to push into northern Syria and Iraq. Syria pretty much capitulates. And who's going to join this war next? Probably just some more random countries on each team. We see Tajikistan, wrong color. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan join the red team. And any other countries joining in? No, that's actually about it for now. So now we finally see some action in the Americas, with American troops being granted full military access to Colombia and beginning to push into the Amazon. But this isn't very useful, as I said, this is the Amazon. Also, French Guiana is technically on the blue team here, but Brazil instantly sent in a ton of forces to wipe it out. With that, the blue team begins to plan naval invasions on Brazil in French Guiana, but not before capitulating Cuba. Okay, what's next here? The blue team begins to push into southern Belarus, wanting to harm Russia and Belarus in any way they can. This goes successfully as Russia begins to retreat some of its troops out of Poland and Eastern Europe. All of Poland is recaptured, and Lithuania as well, with both countries' governments being set back up. And that is a huge win for the blue team as Kaliningrad falls, and more troops are begun to be sent into Belarus. With that, they continue their liberating campaign into the Baltics by pushing into Latvia. The government is reset up, but they don't capture all the land, with Russia sending in some last-minute forces to hold it down. Meanwhile, up here in Northern Europe, we see Finland, Sweden, and Norway begin to push out from Finland, making a good amount of progress all across the border, capturing the entirety of the Kola Peninsula and all of northern Russia with it. With that, we now see Russia beginning a massive campaign into the Caucasus region, with them capturing Baku together with Iran, and nearly capitulating all of Azerbaijan and Georgia. With that, though, the blue team is starting their own offensives into Syria and Iraq, capturing about half the country. With that, we also see Vietnam begin to push into Cambodia, capturing the country and about half of southern Laos, while the red team pushes into northern Vietnam, capturing some of their more important cities. Hong Kong and Taiwan both fall to China, while although South Korea actually begins to push into North Korea. Soon enough, Chinese troops arrive, push the South Koreans out, and then begin their own campaign into northern South Korea. With that, the USA and Japan decide that it's about time that they start a huge campaign somewhere. That campaign is going to be up here in northern Russia, capturing the island of Sakhalin, and making two landings in Siberia, one by the Japanese and one by the Americans right off the coast of Alaska. With that, Russia pretty much just ignores these two landings, as I said, this is Siberia, nobody really cares about it. And the blue team is allowed to push around until they eventually see no point in continuing, and they've captured a small bit of Russia. The blue team now makes a decision. Basically, this war is going to be an endless stalemate if they don't do something about it. Also, I forgot to color in Yemen. So they make a massive campaign with most American, Canadian, Spanish, and Portuguese troops being sent down to South America to attempt to capitulate Brazil and weaken the red team by losing one of their stronger countries. The Americans send in a bit of a distraction into the Amazon through Colombia, but their main attack is going to be off the coast of Brazil, with a military landing being made, recapturing the country of French Guiana, and taking a bit of northern Brazil. But this is only the beginning, as the blue team starts rushing troops into Brazil to try and take as much land as they can before the Brazilians notice. This goes very successfully, with a good portion of northern Brazil falling, and the Brazilian armies being split. With that, the blue team begins to send forces down the coast, until Brazil sends in its full military and stops them. This doesn't stop them completely, though, as they continue smaller campaigns over weeks of fighting. With a lot of blue team troops being sent out of Europe, though, Russia continues its campaign into southern Ukraine, taking about a third of the country before being forced to stop by German and French troops. They then push back in the Baltics until once again quickly being stopped, and they push back in Belarus, wanting to recapture the country entirely. This also leads way to another invasion of Ukraine, as they want the country out of the war as soon as possible, while the blue team continues its fight over here in the Middle East, dedicating a lot of troops to the region, recapturing all of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Border went through. But yeah, they recapture all of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and begin to send more and more troops into Iraq and Iran. With that, all of Iraq falls. Iran starts a defensive near their border along their mountains, but their north has no such protection. Turkish troops push in, cut them off from Russia. With that, all of northern Iran falls. Azerbaijan is reliberated, and so is Georgia, with a push being made from the Caucasus region into Russia now. We also see Turkey continue to push into northern Iran, until eventually the Iranian military stops them. What they don't stop is a Saudi Arabian naval invasion in southern Iran. This reconnects with the main front line, and now Iran really is getting screwed quickly. With that, we actually see some more violent protests starting up in Iran, as some of the blue areas are actually having a better life despite being militarily occupied. With that, Iran begins to fall into a semi-civil war. It's not an actual civil war, but the people are definitely in support of the blue team and not helping the Iranian military. Morale is low, and Iran surrenders. With that, the blue team can begin to send huge amounts of military into Turkmenistan. And although I may be slightly overestimating the blue team here, this area was not at all defended by the red team, so I think they'll be fine. Somewhere where it isn't going so well for the blue team, over here in Southeast Asia and Korea, with two of the strongest red team members, India and China, being very near the region and sending in all of their military. With that, Laos is mostly recaptured, I want to say. Same thing with Cambodia, with both countries being reset up, and Vietnam begins to fall very quickly. No guerrilla warfare will get them out of this trouble that they're in. With that, all of Vietnam surrenders. And same thing with South Korea, with China sending down its full military, which is enough to wipe out the country. Now with this front line set up, they send in huge military personnel into Siberia to fully push the blue team off the continent. Well, they may have pushed them off in the east, but somewhere where the blue team wasn't pushed off, over here in Central Asia, where they expand their front lines even more, taking all of Uzbekistan, fully capturing Turkmenistan, and pushing into Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. This doesn't serve as a distraction for Russia, though, who is beginning to send more and more military into Europe, capturing all of Moldova, even more land from Ukraine. And the only defense still holding up was this northern one that had more divisions since it was trying to invade Russia. They also begin to push back Finland and the Nordics, with more military personnel being sent there. Where do we go from here, though? Back to Brazil. The blue team has been losing in every area except the Middle East, and if you're wondering where all their troops are, they're here. The Colombian and French Guiana divisions meet up, and with that, a massive campaign is made to the Amazon and just all around Brazil, with specially trained divisions. After about half the country falls, they actually surprisingly don't fall into civil war, Their national spirit is high, but that won't stop the fact that they are falling and failing as a country, with them being split into two, one that has barely any population and one that's all that Brazil has left to hope for. With that, the blue team continues to push in until eventually Brazil agrees to a peace treaty with the blue team, which involves their complete and total surrender. With that out of the way, they begin to resend troops to Europe and Asia. But somewhere where they will be needing them now is over here in Central Asia, who has Russian and Chinese support as they begin to take back large portions of the region, with the original blue team onslaught being stopped. And a few countries, such as Colombia, Canada, and Australia and New Zealand, start to tie up South Africa. Now, they're a smaller country, but they've been supporting the red team in any way they can, and any country out of the war is a country out of the war. So they make a deal with a few African countries in which they gained war reparations and maybe even some land if they joined in, to accept Mozambique and Botswana. And with that, the blue team begins to deploy divisions to Africa, although they don't deploy them fast enough, as the South African military is stronger than even Mozambique and oh my god. I mean, even if all of South Africa's neighbors joined in, South Africa's still stronger. With that, Botswana, that's the name I was looking for, begins to fall, while American troops begin to land in Mozambique, pushing back the South Africans out of their borders and beginning to push into South Africa. With that, South Africa sees no hope, as the blue team is literally just stomping them. As I said, South Africa was not worried about being invaded, and had sent their whole military force into Europe and Asia to help out their allies. But with that came a cost, which is that they didn't have nearly enough defenders at home to protect them from an invasion. Without, South Africa falls, and the blue team even got themselves some new allies. And now the real fight begins, with the blue team being able to send its full militaries to the front lines in Europe, Asia. Yeah, just Europe and Asia. With that, the blue team begins a massive offensive into Belarus, capturing a majority of the country, with only a small bit of Russian troops staying in the north. They begin to push back in the Baltics, recapturing a majority of Latvia and Estonia, until both countries are completely liberated. They then begin to send troops into Russia, who at this point weren't getting much Chinese nor Indian help, as they were doing just fine pushing into the blue team, something that isn't true anymore, with them pushing them completely out of Moldova, and Ukraine being not fully liberated, but yeah, majority of Ukraine is liberated. Crimea is recaptured, and a landing is planned to meet up with Caucasus troops in Russia, with the probably most important blue team operation yet being about to commence. The complete fall of Russia is the goal, and that is what they're planning to get. With that, they send in the necessary amount of troops to fully recapture all Ukrainian territory and send in more troops to Russia. They make that landing they had planned and met up with Caucasus troops. With that, they begin to push out on all fronts, and Russia won't survive much longer. With the blue team starting part 2, which is a push into Central Asia, with all of these countries basically just agreeing with the USA that they would surrender in return for not losing any land. With that, they are able to push a lot into the red team with a surprise invasion, while Russia is really going to start to fall here. Blue team troops capture St. Petersburg and a good portion of northern Russia, while they also meet up here in the south with Kazakhstani troops, who are now actually fighting with the blue team. With that, a lot of the more populated regions in Russia fall. Landing is made, capturing Vladivostok and basically all of populated eastern Russia. The landing is remade, in Siberia by the USA and Japan, which goes a lot more successfully this time, as Russia's cut off from the Sea of Okhotsk and now has practically no naval. They can't send ships, they can't trade except with China, maybe India, but they're kind of far away. With that, the blue team is starting to get more allies, as it's getting pretty obvious who's going to win this war. Egypt joins in, Morocco joins in. And that's about it for now, but trust me, there are going to be more. Chile joins in. With that, the blue team begins to push more and more into Russia until all of the east falls. The push to the Ural starts, and within a few more months, Russia capitulates. Mongolia doesn't stand a chance, and now it's just China and India. With that, they basically retreat all troops out of Taiwan, Vietnam, and South Korea, along with retreating out of North Korea, deciding that it's more important to hold their homeland than defend some other countries that were on their team. It's kind of logical if you think about it, but really they're giving up all of their allies in return for trying to save themselves, which I guess you could consider it smart, or you could consider it stupid. With that, all of Xinjiang rebels against China, and same thing happens in Tibet, with them having favor to India, but not enough to the point where they would stay on their side. With that, China is really starting to fall here, as about half the country is captured. Out of Vietnam, they push into Cambodia and Laos. Myanmar falls, and China and India are officially cut off from each other. China retreats troops out of this. There's a panhandle connecting to their other half, but it's not very well defended, as supply is very difficult, and India retreats all troops out. With that, the blue team has the go-ahead to push into South China, and this isn't looking great anymore, huh? Indian troops retreat out of China. All of Kashmir and some of northern India falls. At this point, though, India, I don't think, is this stupid. They agree to a blue team peace treaty and surrender, which leaves just China. With that, the blue team just begins slowly pushing in. This is the progress after another month. And China, you're gonna fall slowly but surely, until eventually all your land has been captured. They make a landing off the coast of Taiwan, capturing Shanghai, and the Battle of Beijing happens, leading to a blue team victory, and most likely the final fight for China has been lost. With that, they continue to push down the coast until the Chinese government doesn't surrender, but the people do, as what happened in Iran. They're seeing better living standards in the blue team controlled areas in war, and they decide to rise up against the Chinese government, as that is their time. So here is the final product with the blue team winning. And let's go ahead and draw in this peace treaty. But first, gotta turn it all to white. And yes, it is kind of annoying to wait for everything to be colored. I'll edit soon, but I can't yet, so sadly, this is all there is for now. Slowly recoloring everything. There we go. With that all colored in, it's now just time to draw in the borders. Set it to the right size and begin. First things first, the USA annexes Cuba. Also, oh my god, what happened to the borders? Nothing I can do about it now, but I don't know, I'll look into it. Can I just... Okay. Fill. Yep, there we go, that fixed it. Still has some parts left, but for the majority of it, this should pretty much fix it. With that, we can now continue it under much nicer borders. Or as I said, they say next is the island of Cuba. And for Brazil, their punishment won't be too bad, but they do definitely feel it, with Colombia gaining land and French Guiana gains land. But the main thing is that not a puppet government. Actually, yes, it's pretty much a puppet government is put into Brazil, which is very good for the victors. Over here in Europe, though, is where most of the border changes are going to happen, with Ukraine being given a lot of land off the Black Sea coast, along with being given a good amount of land out of Russia and out of Belarus. Leaked Russian plans of what to do with Ukraine once the war was over were leaked. As I said, were leaked. And they basically just did the exact opposite to Russia. Yeah, must have hurt, huh, Russia? With that, Poland takes a good bit of Belarus, along with splitting Kaliningrad with Lithuania. Lithuania, as I said, gets a good, even better piece of Belarus, taking about a third of what was left of the country. Latvia expands in all directions into Belarus and Russia. And Estonia also just expands its border a tiny bit eastward. As for Finland, they get those beautiful borders they always get whenever they defeat the Russians. Oh my god. Okay, there we go. Over here in northern Russia, Georgia gains some land across the border, but the new Russian government is allowed to keep a small bit of Black Sea access, along with Azerbaijan getting land. Armenia split. Syria, well, Lebanon and Palestine are next by Israel. Jordan takes some land out of southern Syria. And as for Iraq and Iran, well, yeah, it's not going to be very pretty now, is it? With that, Turkey annexes what's left of Syria, while pretty much all of southern Iraq is given to Saudi Arabia, except for a tiny bit that's given to Kuwait, along with a small bit of southern Iran being given to Kuwait as well, just as, they didn't really do much in the war for the blue team, but they were in it, they were invaded, they lost, so they got stuff. That's the simplest way of putting it. With that, Saudi Arabia takes about half of Iraq, with the other half being given to Turkey. And as for Iran, well, yeah, they're not going to do great, with a good portion of their land being given to Turkey, and the rest of their northern bit being given to Azerbaijan. Turkey is doing great for themselves. They have annexed a lot of land from Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Armenia. Which, Syria and Iraq don't even exist anymore, and Armenia neither. Iran still exists, but a puppet government is put into place, much like the one in Brazil, but even stricter and more, like the blue team is completely in charge. It's not just the government that likes them more, it's a complete blue team head of state. With that, let's finish up drawing in these Middle Eastern borders, and that is how the Middle East... almost forgot about you, Yemen. You're just split between Saudi Arabia and Oman, which, Saudi Arabia also grew quite a bit. Might make them more of a player in the world stage, but so far the biggest winner has definitely been Turkey. Just look at those borders. They gained so much land. As for Serbia, they're forced to recognize Kosovo as an independent state, and a new government is put into place that is pro-blue team. Belarus, well, they barely exist. Would they be allowed to continue to exist is the question here. Well, no, not exactly. They're too small and weak, so they're given over to Russia. That cannot survive on its own. It's too small. It's in the center of Europe. It would just die and be given to all their surrounding countries if Russia didn't annex them. With that, most of Western Europe didn't get any land, but they did get a lot of war operations with the Chinese economy, which is present day the second best in the world, now being, let's just say, not very good. Chinese economy, all the economies of the red team have been destroyed in favor of the blue team through war operations. And although history has shown that's not normally a good idea, just search up how World War II happened, the blue team decides to do it anyways as a form of benefiting off of bad red team choices. Besides that, honestly, I don't even know what to say anymore. I'm just coloring in these northern Finnish borders. Norway might get some land. If they do, it's just going to be like because they did a good piece of the war, lost tens of thousands of men, I'm sure. Yeah, let's give them a small bit of northern Russia, which was going to go to Finland. It's now Norwegian. And yeah, there are the new borders in Europe drawn. Probably next step would just be Asia, but not many things happen here. Vietnam annexes Laos and Cambodia, but no land from China is given to them, as China has a different fate planned. One, I don't know if you would call it better than losing land to their enemies and strengthening the enemies who they fought against for years, but it does involve China losing so much land. With that, all Xinjiang is given independence. Same thing with all of Tibet, which no, these aren't their perfect borders, but it's close enough, and it would lead to the blue team gaining a lot. With that, the Kashmir border dispute is ended. This is what ends up happening with Tibet and Xinjiang getting some of it, while India's claim is no longer recognized by the world, and these new borders are put into place. As for Korea, it all just goes to South Korea, although their name, as I said, will now be Korea. These two islands, Sakhalin and some of these islands, this island chain, will both be given to Japan, while the USA gets a kind of, I don't know, it's like, if you didn't know, Alaska's actually like right here, so it's right off the coast of Alaska. Used to be Russian land, now it's American. As for one of Russia's final punishments, they are, as I do in most of my videos, split into two, Siberia and Russia. And China is just still not done losing, as Manchuria is given independence as well. Hong Kong is given some land to unite with Macau and form a new country. Kind of a city-state, kind of not. Think of it as you will. And the rest of this is now Taiwanese. It's the new Chinese government, and it's under the control of the Taiwan government. I'm pretty sure those are all the borders drawn in now, so yeah, this is a new world map. Oh, almost missed Africa. Literally just like the small sand exchange, as I said earlier. These countries will be getting mostly just better economies, which they're more than happy to get, along with very small land concessions made from South Africa. There. Now, this is the New World Map. Oh my god, I keep forgetting. Okay. Technical difficulties in the Americas. Technical difficulties in the Americas. Can I say it now? Okay, I'm pretty sure after this, that will be the new borders of the world. So there we go. These are the new borders of the world. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.